Welcome to our Soul and the City podcast. This is a community podcast which endeavors to make artistic strolls with fun, one city at a time, but more importantly, absorb, dissect, and reflect socially aware dialogues together with local wordsmiths, event organizers, artists, and art enthusiasts. My name is Soar, author and social innovator, and I will be co-hosting each episode with a team of international hosts and guests in the attempt to ignite and incite universal and individual insights.
My name is Jason Prout. Proute is the spelling. The E is silent. If you're French, sometimes if you say it Proute, it makes a little bit sense for most people to remember because they always forget the E. I'm originally from Barbados, born and raised in Barbados for most of my life. Then I left Barbados around the age of 17 to go to America, got my degree in America in photography and movie making in America. And then I moved to Canada to pursue my dream in aviation. I have been living in Canada since 2017, and the aviation journey has been up and down. Finished up my pilot training, became a flight instructor for 2 years. COVID happened, then everything kind of took a little bit of a slow roll while I was trying to get my permanent residency. So that then I can then move on to the next chapter of my aviation journey, and that is to fly with an airlines. But now things are starting to pick back up again, and hopefully I should be back in aviation a little bit sooner than later.
Thank you for the presentations. Thank you for being part of this podcast. You mentioned that you are now live in Canada, and I would like you to talk a little bit about this huge difference that you're living right now, from going from your birthplace, the Caribbean, and into on the continent in a very cold continent. Can you tell us a little bit about the things, let's say, the things that struck you the most as very different as to what you were used to in the Caribbean, and also the things that you definitely miss about your home?
Well, the biggest thing that kind of shocked me, obviously, was the cold at the first time moving to Canada. I moved in May. Yeah, I moved into Canada in May 2017. And when I left Barbados, 33 degrees, nice and sunny, left there in the typical Caribbean attire, flip-flops, board shorts, and a beach shirt, got my suitcase packed, and I was like, okay, yeah, Toronto is it's warm, but it's not that bad. But my destination was going to a place called New Brunswick, which is Eastern Canada, just right under there by Newfoundland, Labrador, just above Halifax. And when I arrived there, well, it was 17 degrees to a Canadian. That's hot after going through winter in minus 30, minus 20. 17 degrees is a hot day for flip-flops and Caribbean attire. But for me, that was a very big shock. Kind of just reached into my suitcase and pulled out all the clothes that I had, and to realize that I have no winter clothing. But in terms of cultural differences, which is a very tricky one, because I've always been saying this issue of living in Canada compared to America compared to living in the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, we are very, as you know, we can be very relaxed. But at the same time, we are very vocal. I consider the Caribbean a country in its own, not just individual countries. We all have the same similarities and all that. And if you go anywhere in the Caribbean, whether it's the Northern Caribbean or the Southern Caribbean, we all have the similar trait, and that is we speak our mind. You know, we don't do it to be disrespectful. We don't do it to be belligerent or malicious. We just believe in communicating with one another and letting you know what I feel and vice versa, you know, and we respect each other's differences. And that's the one thing I can say about the Caribbean. America has roughly the similar traits, but they're a little bit more, they can be a little bit more rough with it compared to Caribbean culture, in a sense, where if a Caribbean person goes to North America or even goes to Europe and expresses a lot of the things that we grew up with, whether you are white, black, Asian, or whatnot, if you grew up in the Caribbean with the Caribbean mentality of just being free to express yourself, and you go to North America, the culture shock is everyone there is not ready for you. Everyone there does not expect you to be as vocal as you are. America, they're one thing. They love to be vocal, but it's about when they want to be heard kind of thing. Canada, it's more of a, let's pretend it doesn't exist, it will go away. If we talk about it, then we have to deal with it. And if we have to deal with it, then we don't know how to deal with it, kind of thing. That's just the experience that I found. Others may be different, but I found for me that in Canada is a little bit more peaceful than America. And
conservative, you mean, also?
Sorry?
Conservative as well, you mean?
Yes, a little bit more on the conservative side, which is in a sense not bad, but a lot of things that should be dealt with, or you would think coming from the Caribbean, which most people view the Caribbean in itself as a third world country. You would think the things that we left the Caribbean for, the idea of coming to North America, Europe for a better opportunity, then you come to Canada and you realize, well, some of the things here are not that much different from the Caribbean. In fact, some things are a little bit more behind. And that just simply comes down to management of the country, in a sense, just the whole ideas of how Canadians are compared to how Caribbean people are, the social stigma, in a sense, that people probably have learned about Canadians, about how they're very apologetic, they don't want to ruffle any feathers kind of thing. That is for the most part true. And it's not, again, that Canada in a sense is bad or anything. It's just that when there's issues to be dealt with, they just kind of rather pretend, in a sense, it doesn't exist and it will solve itself out eventually. Or if they do address it, they're addressing it in a very closed manner so that not everyone is aware of the issues that are actually going on.
In terms of opportunities, what do you think? The Caribbean being a very lively, joyful place where everybody's trying something out, and there's so many. That was my impression, at least while visiting. I visited only Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, and a little bit of Barbados, the Barbados airport. but I was always under the impression that everybody was on the move. Everybody was trying to do something. Everybody was trying, like it was constantly 24 hours nonstop alive. There's nobody sleeping. And you have the impression, even though you don't live there, but you have the impression that it's constantly on the move and it's constantly developing, or it's constantly doing something. So in terms of opportunities, do you feel, well, probably Canada is more silent, silently on this, silently moving on the opportunities aspects. I don't know. Do you feel that in terms of opportunities, had more opportunities while being in Canada, or you feel that the Caribbean would have given you better opportunities and better chances had you stayed there?
Personally, for me, I don't think I would have been able to develop the person that I am today if I had stayed in the Caribbean. Maybe I might have been able to achieve who I am now, but it would probably have been it would have taken longer for me to achieve who I am right now. And that's just simply because, you ever heard the saying, you're a product of your environment. If you stay within your comfort zone, you never learn to stretch past that barrier. And in the Caribbean, you grow up knowing that you have a sense of freedom in the Caribbean that most places may or may not kind of have. And that's just, as I call it, island mentality. Barbados, the Caribbean, is no different from any other island. You can go to Hawaii, you can go to Fiji, you can go to any of those other islands, and you can experience, in a sense, the same feeling of island life, as I call it, not Caribbean life, but island life, where things get done on their own time. When they're ready to be done, they get done. At the same time, it's more so, yes, everyone is on the move. And that's just because, in a sense, it's a small island. So everybody, you see everyone moving around, you know. But they are doing things for a purpose because, again, as we mentioned earlier, life can be hard for some individuals. So they have to find ways to be a little bit more productive just to live. You know, you probably would have seen in Grenada, Trinidad, if you had left the Barbados airport, you would have also seen that you have the coconut vendors, as we call them. You know, you'll see a coconut, every Caribbean island, you will see a coconut vendor somewhere on the side of the road serving coconuts. That's a normal to see in any island. You go to Hawaii, you find the same thing, you know, because it gives them a sense of independence. I have my own business. They have their own time. Sometimes they just don't like working for the establishments that are already there just because of the sense of, I want my freedom, so to speak. And then, they choose today, okay, I can sell coconuts, or I don't want to sell any coconut water. I can go to the beach instead, which is obviously the biggest handicap of being in the island, because everyone just wants to go to the beach. Whatever the reason is, they leave work, they go to the beach. They call in sick, they go to the beach. Like, that's kind of how it is. In terms of opportunities stretching beyond whatever they can find, you have the typical that you'll find in almost every island, every mainstream thing. Either you're a politician, you're a doctor, you're a banker, going to doing law, or find some way to create your own business. Those are the major things that you will find in any Caribbean island that will give you some kind of wealth, so to enjoy living life, I guess, a little bit more in order to travel out of the Caribbean to see and experience life. Because some people, as I've moved to Canada, I've realized that some people have actually never left Canada or left the town that they've grown up in. Some of them don't even have a passport. They don't even know beyond their borders, you know. And you think, you're living in such a vast place, and yet you have never tried to explore beyond your borders. That's kind of similar mentality that Caribbean people have, but we just have smaller borders. We see those borders every single day. Barbados, you can drive around the island in probably about 5-6 hours, depending if you're making a lot of stops at all the tourist destinations, you know? So when you have seen the island from point to point, done almost everything that you possibly could do before you reach the age of 20, you kind of just want to leave, you know? You kind of just want to get out and explore a little bit more. You probably will go to the other islands, which is, for the most part, affordable to go to Barbados or go to Grenada. But if you want to go to America, if you want to go to Europe, I remember a time when I tried to go to London. The plane ticket to go to London was about $3,000. Well, £3,000, which and if you convert it to Barbadian dollars, 6,000-7,000.
It's still a lot. You don't have to even convert it. It's still a lot.
it's a lot of money, you know. And to come from Barbados to go to America, for me to catch a flight back home to go to Barbados from where I am in Canada, that's about $2,000 USD, you know. So for most people to do those kind of traveling, it probably comes down to just certain times a year where you could probably just get it in for Christmas, or maybe you might get it for once every summer or once every other summer, you know. So for those that can actually leave, who've managed to find a way to leave, either their parents came from living from different islands, so therefore they probably came over for like as a banker and moved to a different department, or a parent who is in one of those before mentioned job opportunities, then their child can easily afford to go overseas to study or whatever. Or if you manage to raise the funds, get a loan and all that stuff, you could potentially go to another Caribbean island. So for instance, if you go to the University of the West Indies, like every Trinidad, Barbados, Jamaica has a University of the West Indies. I believe there's one more island as well. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's Grenada. But if you wanted to get a loan to go to study at the University of the West Indies, because there's those islands that have the same campus, you could basically get a loan to go to those different campuses. In my case, I wanted to be a pilot, so there's no aviation training really that exists in the Caribbean beyond your private pilot's license. Barbados has a program. Trinidad has a program. Those are the only two I can remember at the moment that had any program in terms of getting your pilot's license. But then after that, you have to leave to go overseas to further your license to get your commercial license, So it's just easier to leave the island with the idea of coming back when you're a little bit more financially stable, because $1 is $2 in my currency. So that's the idea. You leave, you get your work, you do as much as you can, you come back, and either you set up your business for yourself or you stay and you find any of those other jobs that I mentioned before, or you go into music, which is a big thing in the Caribbean. A lot of people like to go in, are artists in the Caribbean, either doing paintings, spoken word, singing, any of those artistry kind of stuff you can find in all the Caribbean islands.
Wonderful. It's beautiful how you put the whole, how you structured your answer. Very eloquently. I loved it. From the childhood, how you grow up to be self-sufficient and independent at an early age, and then to be already when you're 20, you already have explored everything. While we on the continent here, it's basically we're dependent on our parents and on our structure, on our social structure here, till the age of 20. So we only have an opportunity to develop and to grow and develop ourselves only starting with the age of 20. It's very interesting. We're very different from this point of view. I couldn't even imagine when I was 20 to go. I mean, I did go in the world, but I was very naive. I did not know what was going on in the world. I did not have that basic experience of life that, that it's many times very good to have. We just spend the whole time in schools and at our homes with our parents, and then you reach at the age of 20 that you do want to explore and want to see the world, but you don't have that experience. And regarding everything, especially your environment, be self-sufficient. We don't know that. We are always dependent. Look, COVID showed us that we are dependent on toilet paper. So, so things like that, like if something happens, we freak out and start buying toilet paper and oil.
My views towards that is, I think within being in a big continent, as my parents always used to put it, you move to a bigger place, you have more problems because you have more distractions, So unless either your parent instills a little bit of discipline, meaning actually parenting and not just giving you an iPad and say, here you go, actually give you the opportunities and the tools that you actually need to have a little bit of sense of focus. And I'm not saying that everyone in big continents has that issue, but significantly what I've seen between living in America and living in Canada, like what you're saying, the school system, the school structure here, still don't really fully understand it, but you graduate high school at 18 years old, just about. In the Caribbean, depending on when you're born, obviously in the year, most kids, if they don't repeat a year, they would usually graduate secondary school or high school equivalent by 15, 16. And then they're immediately applying to go into university or college by the time they reach 17, 18 years old, and the schooling structure is a little different. Because obviously in the Caribbean, we use more of the textbook method. You have the books there, we have a structure, we're referencing the textbooks, and we base your knowledge or test you as you go up, as you get older on the books, and they get harder and harder. Here in Canada, for example, that I know of, things are a little bit more free. In a sense, they don't have that same structure. They allow the teacher to create the structure for the classroom. So it could be anything. You can go from one class to another, same grade. If you didn't like this teacher, you go to another teacher or whatever. And the whole structure can be different. The message may be the same, because that's the blueprint that every school has to follow, but the delivery is different.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Barbados, we remove the variable, and that is the delivery, so that you know this is what you're getting consistently throughout your entire schooling career. So you already now have a structure that you're creating in your head, a blueprint of form over function, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, that's where you start to develop, in my opinion, a little bit of how to be a little bit more self-regulating, in a sense, in terms of your emotions and a little bit of your thinking process. Because even if you don't like something, like say, for example, if you didn't want to go to school, back home, there's no, I don't want to go to school. You know, oh, I'm sick. Oh, you're sick? Have some tea, go to school. You know, yeah. Unless you broke a leg, you're in the hospital, you're dying there in bed, you're going to school regardless. Whereas here in Canada, if you don't want to go to school, the parent can't force you. You know, and then when you reach the age of 16, I believe it is, in Canada, the parent can't even enforce anymore at that point if you want to continue going to school. You know, at 16 years old here, if you decide that you want to walk out, the school can't call you back. You can't call the police and have the police take you back in, because for here, the concept of freedom of choice and whatnot at 16 years old is given to you, whereas most places like Barbados, you get that at 18. Mm-hmm. You know, and then obviously with that mentality, when you get older, you're like, oh, well, I can do whatever I want. I have this, I have that, I have all these different distractions, I have my friends, I can just stay in my own town and never feel like I need to leave because everything's already here and easy accessible for me. Then why would you ever leave? You know, Canada doesn't even teach geography in their high schools. So most people, well, some schools may, like if you go to private schools, but when I moved to New Brunswick and I found out that some of the schools there did not teach geography, it's like, well, no reason why no one wants to leave or no one has any interest in leaving, because they don't know what is out there. You know, they don't know any more other than their own backyard, which is all of Canada, but it's even more reduced. And then when they get to university, they're like, oh, I didn't know about these countries. They decide that they're taking that on their own for those who are a little bit more inclined to want to know a little bit more about the world, or they have parents who came from different parts of the world, so then they know a little bit more. But for the average Joe Schmo Canadian, who parents and everyone raised in Canada, some of them have no clue as to anything aside from Canada and the US.
It's interesting how you compare. Yes, please.
No, I'm saying, so I think just the mentality that we have in the Caribbean, that yes, things can be easy, but at the same time we have to have, they're only easy because we know how to prioritize. We know what we need and what we don't. Whereas again, in North America, bigger continents, you have so much distractions that 9 times out of 10, most teenagers, 20-year-olds don't realize what they actually need out of life until they're closer to 30. But that's just from my experience living between Canada and the US.
Yeah, it's interesting how you compare the two. I think somehow Germany is in the middle between Canada and the Caribbean. From what I know is here you have to finish at least 10 classes. So you have to go to finish your 10 classes, no matter what your situation is. So you might be even 18, but you still have to continue to finish your 10th grade. And also you are somehow at 16, you are liable for your actions and words, but not really for everything. So for example, driving, it's a very simple example. You can drive already at the age of 16, but you have to have an adult with you. So, you know, so somehow in the middle, you do have certain liberties, but they're not really full until you're 18, but you can start already at the age of 16. Your signature is valid. So like I said, you're liable for everything that you sign. You can be taken in court already. And yeah, so, but it's somehow these 2 years are a transition towards your adulthood. So I think Germany is somehow in the middle, like you are starting to be independent and to have your own liberties, but not fully until you're 18. So
Yeah.
just a comparison to see how, because it's very different. Not to even mention Romania is again a completely different story. But I will not talk about Romania, even though there are many similarities between my country and the Caribbean. Trust me, especially in the parenting ways and in the traditional society that we still have. It's very nice and very interesting.
No, I just had two questions, really. I was very interested in the collective identification of Caribbean peoples, how they feel, we're all in this together, versus something more autonomous, island to island. And maybe as an example, if Barbados has a really great track and field tradition, so does Jamaica, does that mean that they feel kind of like, yeah, we share that, or we're rivals? Jamaica turned some of those athletes into bobsled Winter Olympians. I'm not sure if Barbados has ever done that, but is it something where there's kind of a collective pride in, yes, we do identify with one another, or we're kind of our own thing, we're our own island? And probably both, but I would like your perspective on that.
While we are in the Caribbean, we are very patriotic in a sense for our own island. So Barbadians are Barbadians, Grenadians are Grenadians, Jamaicans are Jamaicans, they kind of think in that mentality. But from the time we go afar and we go to live abroad, we kind of now symbolize as one, and that's just because we are a minority in a sense in a bigger place. So when we move overseas, we are in a sense looking for that little bit of creature comforts that we know to find another Caribbean person. It doesn't have to necessarily be another Barbadian or Jamaican. We just want to know that you come from the Caribbean. So you understand a little bit about, again, Caribbean culture, how we talk and how we can be very direct with one another. And it's not that we are trying to be, as I call it, take away anyone's individuality, so to speak. If you have an opinion and I disagree with your opinion within the Caribbean space, we just share our opinions. And if you don't like it, well then, all right, fine, we just move on. But then here in North America, you have the issue of, well, this is my opinion, why don't you agree with my opinion? It's like, I just don't agree. And then when you put that out there, then you have that issue. So that's why we kind of just like to know that we have another Caribbean person there. We can talk about our culture. We can express a little bit about our own experiences living abroad with one another, either in a sense of comparison to see if we are both experiencing the same issues that we experience in our day-to-day lives, or just more in a way to just kind of wipe our brain from the things we have seen that really make no sense with our Caribbean upbringing, and just kind of get back to a sense of normality, so to speak. So that be like, for instance, food. I am a big foodie. If you've ever been to the Caribbean, you know that the food is lovely. No matter where you go, it has flavor. Come to North America, it can be hit or miss. So when we find a Caribbean spot that we can go to, that's maybe like a place where we go to meet up, or there's a club that plays Caribbean music and not the North American idea of Caribbean music. And that is probably Caribbean music that came from like early 2000s. We're in 2022 and some of them don't even play the updated Caribbean or Afrobeats music, because now that we live in a bigger place and we can experience a little bit also of the African culture, because in the Caribbean, everybody knows that we just came from Africa, but we hardly have either Africans come to the Caribbean, or we interact with a lot of Africans that may be in the Caribbean, But when we come to a bigger country and we experience real African people from the motherland, like, we then now see a sense of where that culture came from, in terms of like how we talk, the music that we listen to, the rhythms, the differences in food, it's a very joyful thing to have when you're living overseas. So then like we asked earlier, overseas, when we're in a foreign country, the Caribbean to us is our continent. It doesn't matter if you're from Jamaica, St. Lucia, Antigua, whatever, the Caribbean is our continent. So if we're watching sports, we cheering for any of the Caribbean people that we may not be from that country, but for us, you representing the Caribbean, we cheering for you.
Yeah, yeah, it's great to hear a collective soul and individual souls and spirits. I also wanted to ask about your photography and maybe if it combines at all with your ambition or your dreams to be a pilot. So there's something about a bird's eye view, you know, looking at the earth from a different perspective. And we can all do that from a passenger seat on a plane, but to be a pilot and to really, I guess, navigate that sense of terrain. What was it about photography that you really wanted to explore? And maybe does that link also to what you had just described about cultures in common and cultures individually?
Um, so this one is a very interesting because obviously flying, photography, movie making, they have very little to go hand in hand other than just the perspective of the onlooker. But just another little backstory about it. So I got into aviation at a very young age. My dad always wanted to be a pilot, but the two women in his life refused to let him become a pilot because in those days aviation was still up and coming. And as a Black person in those times, just became a lot harder to even be a pilot, you know. But he always had a strong passion for aviation and just seeing technology advance, you know. So at 5 years old, I remember seeing my mother get on a plane to, I actually don't remember where it was she was going, but I saw her get on a plane at 5 years old. And from 5 years old, that's all I ever wanted to be. There was nothing else I ever contemplated of doing with my life. From the time I heard the power of the engine start up and just seeing, I think it was Virgin at the time, just take off and you're seeing tons and tons of metal just take off into the air very majestically. I was like, nope, that's all I want to be. I don't care. That's all I want to do. I'm figure out how to get it done. It was a very big ambition for me as well because I am dyslexic. You know, I don't really tell a lot of people that. And in my time of going to school in Barbados, dyslexia was not something that people really knew much about. They just saw you as being lazy or being a delinquent or just not somebody who's willing to learn. So if you're going through the public school setting, they kind of just cast you aside. You know, they just ignore you. You're in a class of 25 students, you know, they're not going to focus on the one person who's obviously taking a little bit of extra, taking a little bit of time, you know. You would either get the teacher who does kind of be patient with you, but majority of the times you really didn't, because 25 students, you have a certain amount of time to get through the material, you know, they're just going to skip over you and just go to the next person. Or in many cases, what they did with me, they use you as an example to then indicate to the other students that if you be lazy, if you're being a delinquent, you'll come up here and you'll look like this guy who is having a little hard time reading or doing mental maths, you know. I remember as a kid growing up, I had a teacher tell me that I would never equate to being half of my father because my father was a journalist. He can use words in ways that confuse a lot of people. You know, he's a lyricist, but I never really wanted to be in that position because my father went into advertising, did journalism. I just wanted to be a pilot and travel the world. So I was like, okay, that doesn't really bother me because we're different people. But as a kid growing up, being told by public school teachers, you're lazy, you're a delinquent, you're never going to amount to anything just because they don't know that I have a learning disability in a sense. Even in a sense, my parents, because again, the old school ways of doing things back in the 90s and the 80s is just, you got to get it done. No excuses. You figure out a way, you get it done, you know? So at 7 years old, my dad gifted me for my birthday to go out for a flight because his one of his friends back in Barbados used to own an airplane, and he was also a flight instructor. So 7 years old, my dad lets me go up and do a little sightseeing flight around the island. And then to my amazement, the pilot actually was like, all right, you have control. I was like, what? Me? 7 years old, could barely see out the front, but I can see through the side. And he was like, yep, you fly the plane. By that time, I kind of had an idea of how flying was, because I had something called Flight Simulator 2004 at the time. So I was on that thing religiously every time. I would go home, do my homework, and I'm on there. On the weekends, instead of like, I would go out and play for a few minutes, because obviously my parents would force me to get out and actually enjoy the sunlight, go to the beach, whatnot, don't stay indoors all day. But then when that was over, I'm back on the simulator, and I'm going through all the paces. I'm learning all the materials on there and whatnot, because that was my passion. Still is my passion. So at 7 years old, when he told me, all right, you have control, and I took control of the airplane, and the plane was still continued to be steady. After the flight, he got back on the ground and told my dad, whatever you do, make sure he becomes a pilot. That was all that he said. After that, I got a few more lessons. We actually started my pilot journey around 10 years old, at that point where I'm actually kind of, in a sense, doing actual flying lessons. Even though legally you can only start at 14, but we kind of got away with it because it was his own personal plane. So anytime he went for a flight, I would go with him, and he would just give me a little bit of advice here and there. And in doing that, I wanted to capture the sense of what I thought to be freedom. Because for me, flying, being above there, as you said, having that bird's eye view, just getting away from people, in a sense, is just very magical. It's relaxing. Yes, you are thousands of feet above the earth. You're this one little dot in this vast sky, but that's where the magic comes in, because you tune out everybody else. It's just you, the machine, and the views. So if you're flying over the ocean, well, all you're seeing is the water. But depending on how high you are, depending on the day, like in the Caribbean, you get to about 5,000 feet, you get 4 miles off Barbados, and you can see the entire Caribbean chain from Trinidad going all the way up as far as your eyes can see. And the photography started to come as my way of trying to capture those moments day by day, because every situation is going to change because the weather changes, or the 1 minute you see this nice sun rays come through the clouds, just highlighting an island somewhere in the distance, or you see the ripples of the sunset on the ocean, and you get that nice orange golden glow just covering the entire sky and the ocean. So that's where the photography came in.
It's a beautiful Renaissance journey. Really.
Sorry it took so long.
No, I loved hearing all that.
But yeah.
Jason, we some of the final questions now. As you know, at our podcast, we're searching for the soul of every city, or in this case, the Caribbean. So you know that the title we chose for this one is it's a spice thang, the Caribbean heat.
Right.
It was my idea and my impression after having been there for actually twice. I've been in the Caribbean twice. Once in Trinidad and Tobago, but for a short time, and then second time in Grenada for about 10 days, I think. I know it's very little, it's nothing to compare, but it was just my impression that there's something spicy about the entire Caribbean. So please agree or disagree with me. Let us know what you feel is the soul of the Caribbean in general. And also tell us a little bit about the artistic scene, because I have been there and tried to connect with so many. There's actually a group on Facebook called the Caribbean Spoken Word Artists or whatever. They are silent. They are there. I'm posting so often on their group. I think I'm the only one posting there. And nobody replies. So it's been a struggle for me to connect with, because everywhere I travel, I always try to connect with artists. And it's been a struggle. I have to admit, it's been a struggle. I have been struggling a lot. And because every time I come to complain and to tell you, hey, Jason, I'm not finding anyone. Help me out here. Where are you guys?
Yes.
So you know that because every time I come to you, I've been trying so hard to connect with, but I haven't seen nor heard of anything artistically going on there for the 10 days that I have been there, and it was during summer, except for, I have to admit, there's a street in Trinidad. I think it was in Trinidad. There was one street where you go, and it was a famous street, and every single bar had a lot of music, and it was like more like a clubbing thing,
Right.
But not so too much action for me, to be honest.
It is a
as
lot.
you can imagine, then what I was looking for, like, poetry nights, and I'm not saying that there is differences. Every aspect of culture, and of course music is amazing, but people there were probably displaying things for tourists, what the tourists need, and the tourists want to just get drunk and have fun and have music. And I truly believe this is not the artistic life. There can be more than that, is more than that. We just don't know, because we as tourists are only facing what the surface, we only see the surface. Tell me, where are the artists hidden? And where is what is the soul of the Caribbean to you? So these two questions.
If you ask every Caribbean person what would be the soul of the Caribbean, they will always say their island, and that's just what they know, Each island, obviously, while in the Caribbean, has their squabbles with each other island, how they think one island may be feeling they're better than this or whatever. But as I said earlier, for me, the Caribbean is all the islands. It's not just one island. So to say which island or where is the soul of the Caribbean would not be a good representation of the Caribbean, because every place in the Caribbean has their own soul. Some are similar in nature, but at the end of the day, you want to experience the soul of those islands and not just see the Caribbean as one island is speaking for the entirety of the Caribbean. But if you were to look at just the Caribbean itself and extract the few things that are similar: expression, freedom, happiness, peacefulness, then that would be the soul that sums up the entire Caribbean.
Not the spice?
Well, each island has their own spice. If you go to Grenada, they're known as the Spice Islands. My mom, she's Grenadian. My dad is Barbadian. My mom's Grenadian. Grenada is the Spice Island. Got the nutmeg, Barbados, we have sugarcane. We have pepper sauce. Trinidad, sugarcane, added pepper sauce. But every Caribbean island you go to, they got their own kind of spice. They got their own flavor, So the
jerk spice comes from you, right?
No. The jerk comes from Jamaica. The one thing you got to know about the Caribbean is the jerk comes from Jamaica, nowhere else.
Okay.
And again, Jamaica, in a sense, the reason why people have Jamaica. Okay, if you were to say the soul of the Caribbean, for most people outside of the Caribbean, they'll probably say it's Jamaica, because Jamaica is or has been the point of interest for many years due to Bob Marley. Bob Marley is who kind of helped Jamaica in those days become known as the tourist destination. You have reggae, you have dancehall, you have soul, and then you have your jerk chicken, you have your jerk foods, all them kind of things that people know when they go to Jamaica. So when you look in North America, can't really say much about Europe, but in North America, when you see things being advertised a lot to go towards the Caribbean, you see Jamaica, you see Trinidad, you see Bahamas, you see Antigua, you see St. Martin, you see Puerto Rico. You see all those other islands that are very either close to America or have strong influences or American ties, so to speak. Bahamas, they're practically right there next to Florida. They use the US dollar more so than they use their own currency. Most people in the Caribbean would consider Bahamas a part of America, but they're Caribbean, you know. Same thing with Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has their own currency and whatnot, but they use American dollars. But Puerto Rico is an American territory, so that explains why, you know. But overall, I would say the Caribbean in itself, as the soul, is in the Caribbean. Each island brings that unity together to create one big soul, so to speak. In terms of where the artists are, can't really speak so much about the other islands, but from my understanding, just from what I've seen and the few friends that I have who are musicians and a few of the artists that are in the island, I think a little bit is the fear of the unknown as to like what's going on out there in the world. How is my music? How is my paintings? How is my art going to be perceived? You know, because you have the whole term struggling artist. Everyone knows the story of the artist who's trying to come up, trying to express themselves so that the world can appreciate. But it's also a little bit hard coming from the Caribbean. You know, you have the Black artist who's trying to show his music, but no one's actually listening, you know, compared to the white artist who may come out from the Caribbean, but now he gets the traction because he may have the finances to get there, or just people give him the betterment of the doubt and give him a little bit of an opportunity. So you have that, obviously. And I know I sent a few friends your way to try to come on the podcast, but also is a little bit in the sense of just their image, so to speak. So now is like, okay, I'm going on a podcast. What is this podcast about? How is this podcast going to be perceived? Like, how are the people going to perceive me as an artist? Are people in my space going to think differently now of me that I'm on a podcast? Or do I misrepresent myself? Because obviously some of them have management. And if the management says it's not a good idea, well, they're going to follow it to the letter, you know? If you go to, as you mentioned, when you would go to the Caribbean, you go to the downtown, so to speak, the Caribbean spots, you hear those live music performances. That's usually what you're going to find there in the Caribbean. And in a sense, it's more so like they're just doing it because they like it. Some of them may not actually want to do it as a career, but they just do it because, and others do it because they actually want to be taken seriously in it. But at the same time, just trying to get out of their own head, get out of that, oh, I'm comfortable here, you know, why do I want to go there? As my dad kind of put it to me when I left. He never left the Caribbean. He stayed in the Caribbean. He went to different islands to do many different things, but he actually never got out to go to America. And for good reason. Back in his day, it would have been a little bit harder. But he put it in this way, which kind of makes sense, how I see most people who kind of limit themselves to the borders of which they grew up in. And that is, why would I leave my pond where I'm a shark to go into a bigger pond to become a guppy? You know, that's that fear of what if? And obviously in the music, I'm not musically inclined in any way, but being around artists, that's the same perception right now. Yes, I have gigs going. I go to spoken words. In Barbados, we had something called open mic night. I am not too sure if it's still there, but it was at the Hilton. Every Thursday, you would get poets, you would get upcoming songwriters, upcoming painters, musicians, just go there to give themselves an audience, and it was always packed. 9 times out of 10, the locals that were going there to perform couldn't get in because obviously now the hotel itself has to keep a little bit of vacancy for their guests so the guests can experience it as well.
I'm sorry, one question. Was it organized by the managers of the hotel itself, by the Hilton, or was it organized by the local or artists? You have any idea? Or
I believe a few artists got together and tried to talk to the Hilton management as a place, hey, can we have a venue here? And obviously then the management decided that that would have been okay. Once a week, every Thursday between 7 o'clock to 12 o'clock would be a good time in their conference hall. And I just saw that as a way, well, obviously thinking of it from a hotel manager's point of view, this is good business. We have local artists coming to perform. The tourists can come in here at any time to see what's going on. We are getting free talent basically because they say, yeah, you can use the venue, so to speak. They're not paying for the talent. The talent is paying for the venue, but at the same time, they're reaping the benefits of it. I don't know if it's still going on. I haven't been to Barbados in a while, but you can go to any bar in the Caribbean, any hotel, and you're going to see the same thing. You're always going to see one of the local musicians in there performing, and the hotels and the bars will just kind of rotate just to give people the exposure that way.
Do you have anything of your own that you want to add? Because we have somehow aggressed you a little bit with a lot of questions, and we kind of forced you our way, to answer to what we wanted to hear. But maybe you have something of your own that you want to say or to add to this podcast. Like you have seen, the podcast is not so scary. So we only have 4 sessions per year. We have the summer, the winter, the spring, and the autumn episodes. So we have been doing this with local artists from different cities, and with producers or event creators from different cities. And we just tried to connect and interlink somehow the communities together. So I believe the podcast is a really positive way in somehow presenting yourself and also reaching out to others if you want a little bit to explore the world and explore also other communities and other cities and other options that are out there. So it's an open-minded invitation to all the artists and places that people would dream to go and probably would never get there, or would definitely get there once they hear our podcast. So yeah.
Agreed. As I put it to the 2 people that I had referred to you, were to don't think of it as a podcast, but think of it more as an open mic night, just in the sense that you're basically going there to promote yourself in a way. Obviously, everyone's comfort zone is their comfort zone, so, but yeah, I think moving forward in the future to give people in the Caribbean that opportunity to get on a international platform such as what this podcast is basically going to be, because it's going to be in Europe. You're going to have people from different parts of the globe coming on this podcast as a way to express their talents. Don't fear the opportunity of not knowing what's actually going to be there.
What we want with this podcast is actually to allow our listeners to explore for themselves and have their own ideas. So this is not necessarily for us, but it's for the people who listen to it and who would like to explore more, not just the land, but the people, the culture. So they would want to know. That's why you always ask the same typical questions. What are the things to miss, or what are the places to go while there, so that our listeners will know, okay, listen to this podcast about the Caribbean, and there was some interesting aspects about it and some nice places that were mentioned. And when I go there, I will know better than just Googling through the touristic perspective or through the typical stereotypes that are known about the Caribbean. So we're somehow trying to debunk the stereotypes, and we're trying to connect with locals and natives that will tell us better about the essence and about the soul of their places. But we made it mainly for our listeners than for ourselves.
Well, as I mentioned to you when you were at the Barbados airport, if you really do want to experience the Caribbean, yes, you can go through the typical tourism streams and do everything there, but I have always told people 3 years, don't stay at a resort. Right now we have Airbnb. Airbnb is such a beautiful platform for people to actually experience things outside of just what the hotels want to show you. I've always just said, if you can find a beach house, just get a beach house. buy your own groceries. You can go and rent a car. The Barbados rental cars, you have those convertible open tops that you kind of, the idea of the beach life, surfer life kind of thing. We have those cars there. Every island, in a sense, has their own appealing thing to them. Obviously, some places have a little bit more crime, sadly, compared to other islands, and that just comes down to doing your own due diligence as to which island has a higher crime rate or certain parts of the island where not to go. But for the most part, every Caribbean island that you go to, you can literally just walk up from the airport and just hop a ride with somebody if you actually want to, and they'll take you to where you need to be without any questions, fuss, or anything like that. Or if you just want to rent a car yourself, just rent a car, go and explore, drive around, get a beach house, get an Airbnb, buy your own groceries, invite who you want to invite over, and you're going to have a much more joyful experience compared to just going to the hotel resort. But obviously some people prefer to do the resort because they're being guided, the resort is creating this thing for you. So like, for instance, if you go to Sandals is an all-inclusive resort. There's no money that goes through that hotel. Everything in Sandals is pretty much already catered for you, because there's a couples resort, but at the same time, they tell you where to go. They structure everything for you. So if you wanted to go snorkeling with the turtles, you pay for that already in advance, and it's already scheduled for you. So then they take you, their people will be your tour guide, so to speak, instead of you actually just getting out and exploring it for yourself.
Yeah, that aspect of serendipity, I think, is really important for all of these podcasts, because, and I wondered about that with possibly the limitations of islands in terms of space, or whether the resort or the tourist ship would come in and you only have these 4 hours of docking until you go to another place, or whatever would be the limitations. In Europe, I think when people do get off the train, and it's often a train, from Berlin to Prague and Prague to Budapest, exactly what you said. I mean, where can I go that's a little bit off the beaten path?
Yeah.
I never loved the term expatriate. I've been here 26 years. I never really liked the feel of that. But I'm going to an open mic actually in just an hour here. So I will see other expatriates. I'll see some Czechs. I'll hear about, I'm predicting, about 7 different languages, as the open mic encourages that. And I just think that soul that exists here, but exists in Berlin, exists in the Caribbean, I just think that's just such a wonderful thing that our listeners would naturally gravitate to, and appreciate what are the touristic structures, but what are those things that they just haven't yet imagined, and it will unfold.
Right. Exactly.
Thank you so much for being with us and for opening up our discussion about the Caribbean. We will continue tomorrow. We have 4 beautiful girls coming from different parts of the world as well. And we will continue to explore a little bit their points of view on the Caribbean and their opinions. Daniel, if you have something to say.
I have nothing to say, except I'm going to my open mic with a skip in my step, because I really, really appreciated this time, and good to meet you, Jason.
Likewise, Daniel. It was a pleasure meeting you. I really do miss European culture in a way, just because it's a breath of fresh air to get out of the North American perspective of things, and obviously again just the artistic scene of Berlin plus the food. But yeah.
All right. So then don't be a stranger. Let us know. And for our listeners, thank you so much for being with us. We will continue tomorrow with the next podcast. And blessings and all the love for everyone.
Bye-bye.